the UN mediator assassination that rewrote diplomacy. In September 1948, a man stepped into a white United Nations vehicle in Jerusalem. He was unarmed, he was neutral, and he believed, genuinely, that reason could still stop a war. Minutes later, bullets tore through that car. The man died on the seat beside the UN flag. His name was Folke Bernadotte, and his assassination would quietly change how global diplomacy worked forever. Not because it caused outrage, not because it triggered war, but because it proved something far more disturbing. That even neutrality could be considered a threat. To understand why this killing mattered, we need to go back to the world Folke Bernadotte came from. Europe, just 3 years earlier, had survived the most destructive war in human history. Tens of millions were dead. Cities were rubble. Borders were redrawn by force. Out of that chaos came a new global experiment, the United Nations. Its promise was simple but ambitious. Never again would the world sleepwalk into a catastrophe without a forum for dialogue. Folke Bernadotte was one of the people who believed in that promise. A Swedish diplomat and humanitarian, Bernadotte had already saved tens of thousands of lives during World War II through negotiations with Nazi Germany. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a politician chasing power. He was a negotiator. So when violence erupted in British-controlled Palestine in 1947 to 1948, the UN turned to him. The region was collapsing into open conflict following the UN's partition plan. Jewish and Arab communities were clashing. British authority was unraveling. The UN needed a mediator, someone neutral, someone respected, someone calm enough to stand between enemies who no longer trust words. Bernadotte accepted the role, and by doing so, he walked into one of the most volatile political minefields of the 20th century. From the moment Bernadotte arrived in the region, he realized something was deeply wrong. This was not just a local conflict. It was a collision of trauma, nationalism, survival, and ideology. Every side believed history was on their side. Every side believed compromise meant extinction. Bernadotte proposed ceasefires. He pushed for humanitarian corridors. He tried to slow the violence long enough for diplomacy to breathe. At first, it worked. Temporary ceasefires held. Aid reached civilians. But behind the scenes, anger was growing. Some groups believed Bernadotte's proposals favored the other side. Others believed the UN had no right to interfere at all. And then came the proposals that changed everything. Bernadotte suggested territorial adjustments and the return of refugees displaced by the fighting. To some factions, this wasn't mediation. It was betrayal. Whispers began circulating. Then threats. Then surveillance. Bernadotte was warned that his safety could not be guaranteed. But he refused heavy protection. He believed neutrality was protection enough. That belief would cost him his life. On September 17, 1948, Bernadotte's convoy moved through Jerusalem. Vita umbaiklas. Clear markings. No secrecy. Then, at a checkpoint, armed men stopped the car. They wore military-style uniforms. They moved with confidence. This was not a spontaneous attack. Gunfire erupted. Bernadotte was hit multiple times. So was his UN colleague. The attackers disappeared into the city. Within minutes, the UN's first official mediator was dead. The world was stunned. But here's the twist. The killing was not universally condemned. In some circles, it was quietly justified. The message was clear. Diplomacy had crossed a line. Aftermath. What the world did next. You would expect an assassination like this to trigger sweeping justice. It didn't. Investigations stalled. Accountability faded. Political realities took over. The UN, shaken, made a silent decision. From that moment on, mediators would never again rely on goodwill alone. Security became standard. Neutrality became guarded. Diplomacy hardened. Peace talks began to look less like conversations and more like fortified operations. Bernadotte's death didn't just end a life. It ended an era. The era where moral authority alone could protect a mediator. Why this still matters. Today, UN envoys travel with armed escorts. Peace negotiations happen behind layers of security. Not because diplomacy failed, but because Folke Bernadotte proved something uncomfortable. That truth, even when neutral, threatens power. That mediation challenges those who benefit from chaos. And that peace is never just about good intentions. It requires protection, structure, and the acceptance that some people fear peace more than war. Bernadotte believed words could stop bullets. History answered with gunfire, and the world quietly adjusted. If you want more hidden files like this, real stories that shaped how the world works today, subscribe. Because the most important truths are often the ones history barely talks about.